None of these guys have ever been in a plane. Almost none of them have even driven a car.
Right.
The first test to just see who might be qualified to even start flight school was the drinking game that I remember playing, where you put a broomstick on your forehead and you put the broom down, you spin around in circles a number of times, and then you have to try to walk in a straight line. That was like a guy with a clipboard was like, History,
I'd like to follow me down the rabbit hole. History, I'd like to, frankly, I want to know.
Hello, and welcome to HILF, History I'd Like to Fuck, where history is a party and everybody's coming. I am your host, Dawn Brody, and wow, it's been a minute, right? If you're listening to this, as it is freshly released, girl, it's been a whole month since a new HILF episode has dropped. It was the holiday break, and then I took this epic road trip with my husband and my kiddo. It was amazing, and I just hope really that you didn't get too desperate for your history, right? Were you out there? Were you thirsty? Did you slum it with them dusty old history podcasts where they never say fuck? Oh no, I'm sorry, I'm back. And it's so great because this episode marks the beginning of HILF's 4th season, yes. And I got big news too, because I've just jumped in bed with a new podcast network. Oh, it's called the Big Comedy Network. And guys, it's so great because it's a team. Oh, mama's got a team. And the whole idea here is that nothing really changes, except that there's more HILF. All right. With their help, we're going to be doing more episodes, specials, bonus stuff, video. What? I know, it's very cool. And to hear more about them and us and this whole thing, you can just click on the link in the show notes or go to bigcomedynetwork.com. So excited. As for us, you and me, baby, what a hot HILF to kick us off today. Oh, it's the story of North Korean fighter pilot and defector No Kum-suk. Now, this guy, he's born and raised in North Korea, all right? He's trained by Kim Il-sung to fight against America, but he steals his MiG-15 fighter jet and then just lands it on an American air base. Like, hi, here's this super secret plane, and I'd like to live here now. How did he not get shot down? Did the North hunt him down? What happened to the plane? It's such an amazing story, all right? And I get to tell it with my guest, comedian and bookworm, Andy Ryder. He's so great. He's got his first comedy album out right now and the best sideburns you've ever seen in your life. We are sitting around my kitchen table, and we're so glad that you have joined us. Let's get started. Okay, so Andy, this episode's been a minute.
Yeah.
In the making.
Yeah.
I'm so excited that you're here.
So pumped about this. This is very fun.
And you really do have the best sideburns in the business.
Oh, thank you.
Have you always curated your sideburns? Is this something like new to your facial aesthetic?
No, I've had them since like 2009. Like there was a couple times I shaved them, but then they came back because I was just like, this feels weird without them. So why not bring them back? But I used to work a job at a medical university where my job was to explain the U.S. tax system to incoming international doctors and students. And so quite a few of them did not take me seriously because I look much younger than I am. And so like at the time I looked like I had been told several times that at that hospital, they were like, I thought you were in high school. Oh, some of them were like, can I please speak to somebody else? And I was like, you can't, I'm the only person here.
I'm the one.
And so one Christmas Eve, I was running late to a Christmas Eve service, and I had to shave, but my razor ran out of juice midway through, and I was like, I only have enough. And my facial hair doesn't connect either, so that's another thing.
There's gaps.
There's gaps. So it's like, well, what am I going to do? Either a mustache or this? And I was like, this is more fun. So I went with this, and then I was just like, yeah, this is fine. And anytime I've seen my face without them, I'm like, that does look weird.
What is that face doing out there?
Yeah, that face doesn't need that.
I think they're fantastic.
Thank you, Dawn. I feel good about them. I like them.
Absolutely. Do people assume because we're in LA that you're in some sort of period drama and that you're doing this for some
I thought that would happen. This has not happened yet. No.
It looks like you're about to rob a bank in Northfield.
Yeah. Or like I'm some kind of like in some kind of IRA drama. You're like,
Yeah, you can't get away from taxes, man.
No. I'll take them out. Let's do it. Let's handle this.
So walk me. What is the trajectory for a young sideburns man to go from teaching American tax law to incoming doctors to stand-up comedy?
Like comedy was like something I always like grew up like wanting to do, but I didn't know how you got about. I assumed that there was a degree in comedy that you could get, and I was like, well, not in South Carolina, because I looked at all the schools. I was like, is there a degree in comedy?
Is there a comedy college?
Yeah. Is there anything? They're like, no, that's not a thing. I was like, okay. And like comedians at the time, it felt like they were not very forthcoming about how you got into comedy. They're just like, you just do it. I was like, do it where? I don't understand. So it wasn't until after I got married, actually, that another friend of mine that I met playing co-ed soccer was like, oh yeah, they teach improv at this theater. We should go do that. I was like, oh, okay. Because we both like comedy. And so I did that. And then he was like, oh, this friend runs a mic. You should do that. And then we did it. And at the same time, I was like, oh, I'm going to take this like very whatever, no big deal. But then I was like, oh no, I'm like good at this. And like, I'm getting better at this. And I want this more. And it was like, at the time there was like a lot of like, and there still probably is a lot of good comics in Charleston, but at the time there was like a lot of good comics in Charleston. There was like Dusty Slay was one of them. He was like a few years ahead of me. Jason Gross, Derek Humphrey, my friend Tommy Hutchins, like all these people were like really good at comedy. And I was like, oh no. Like, and so like it became like this weird, like iron sharpens iron thing. Where we're like all trying to be better than each other. So as a result, like we're getting better at comedy, and it's like, oh, we're going to have to move. And so people started to move. Lauren and my friend Derek moved to New York. I had friends who moved to Chicago during the coldest winter on record for Chicago. I was like, you guys did not plan this very well. They're like, it's too late. We're here now.
The love of the art,
I guess. Yeah. All the people who moved here to LA, half of them stayed and the other half have moved on since. But it's just interesting. I was like, oh, but like, I know that there's like the classic hymn behind me. Like a lot of them are still in Charleston. Like they're just like, no, I like this, just doing this level. And I'm like, oh, that's totally fine. You know, that's great. Yeah. Good for you on having a healthier outlook on this. Yeah. That's fun.
And then, so you and the wife transplanted to Los Angeles to pursue your dream in comedy.
Yep.
And what is she doing here?
She is a graphic designer for a company. Yeah, she's a graphic designer. She works for a company that makes N95 masks, actually.
So business is booming.
Business is doing well. They hired her during the pandemic, actually. So she's like, all right, cool. She loves it. She's like doing good. She has her artistic outlet as well that she does stuff with, and she's trying to get more of that stuff. She does like a lot of cool like stuff with skulls and skeletons. She loves skulls and hearts. Yeah.
Well, and that kind of is how we met. So you and I ran into each other in the LA comedy paradigm, doing a gig downtown LA, right?
Creature Comforts Brewery.
Love, yes.
Yeah, dude.
And I fell in love with you. I thought you were so funny. And your wife had this dope. She was with you. She had this dope, like, skull purse.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And we just connected immediately. I think we downed a couple beers. We talked about history. And I was like, well, we're either having a three-way or this guy's going to be on my podcast. Yep. I don't know. Maybe both. We'll see.
Oof.
We'll start with this. And then we'll see. We'll see maybe how things go. How is your comedy album doing? Let's see. The Get Together.
Yeah,
is the title.
It was released in August, and it did really well. Like it was like number one on iTunes and like number one on Amazon. New comedy releases. I beat Jim Gaffigan for a little bit.
Yeah,
and it got like written up about in Paste Magazine. I'm like indie music guy, so I was like, what? I'm in Paste Magazine, so that's pretty cool.
It's got to be so great because man, it sounds like you were in that class of LA folks who came in. Pandemic hits. The strike hits. Now we've got the fires. I mean, I think it's always been a tough grind here in LA, but we've had some peripheral fucking impacts that have made it kind of a slog.
For sure. Yeah, it's definitely like not easy. But like the pandemic, I feel like, man, there used to be so many shows here in LA, and now that it feels like there's like maybe half as many shows as there once was. It's real sad. But it's also like kind of encouraging too, because it's like, no, now you have to get out of the city. You can't just hang out in LA. You got to go to other cities and do comedy there.
You got to go to Palmdale, which is lovely.
Yeah, do Palmdale. Got to hit up San Diego. There's Bakersfield. Did you know there's comedy in Bakersfield? I didn't.
As you and I speak, you are poised on the precipice of podcasting greatness because you're about to launch a brand new podcast that I'm going to listen to, and I have a hunch people who dig my podcast are going to like because it's for nerds. It's for bookworms. And it's kind of sexy.
It's very sexy.
It's called Fingering the Page.
Fingering the Page.
And it's for bookworms. Tell me about your co-host and what this is going to be about.
So it's my friend Katie Novotny. She's from Chicago. Hope that doesn't offend.
We'll see.
Okay. Katie's awesome. We used to do this. We used to run a show at the Improv, and we would always open it up with us talking about a weird book that we'd found and doing a quick book report on the book, and then also like playing like a weird little game with the book, depending on the book. So like the books that we were reviewing are very weird, like romance books.
Yeah.
So like the first episode we're doing, which is dropping next week, is called A Pegasus for Christmas.
Love it. I already love it.
It is about a man. He works for a secret government agency. I don't think they have a name for it, but they are trying to, solving all the weird, strange stuff. He also turns into a Pegasus. No big deal.
Like a la werewolf, a la vampire.
Yeah, exactly like a werewolf, but transformation into a Pegasus.
Okay. Do they call it getting pegged?
You wish, right?
I do.
You would think so. No, but his last name, Hardwick.
Oh,
I was like, come on, bud.
Come
on, bud. Come on, dude.
Yeah.
So a lot of these books deal with like people who are like fated mates. They're like, we are destined to be together for whatever reason. Maybe we don't get together, but we like before, but now we are. His love interest is this woman that they used to date like 20 years ago. She now lives in a tower in a seaside town, just monitoring. She can't let him know that she does magic. She doesn't know that he's a Pegasus person.
This is nuts.
This is crazy. And 20 years later, they just happen to meet up because of a crazy thing happening in that seaside town.
Boy, tell me, is this marketed for young adults or romance or fantasy sci-fi? Tell me what the cover and the blurb are trying to get.
The cover, I think, is like women who like hot, muscular dudes that also
he's
turn into
not a
males.
Horse yet. Or maybe you can see sort of the implication of like rippling hoarseness. Oh,
there's no hiding it. I don't want to. Let's see.
Okay, and
I'm trying to get the cover here. Yeah, here we go. You tell me, Dawn.
All right. Okay. So what I'm looking at here is the cover of A Pegasus for Christmas. We've got hot guy.
Dressed kind of like Santa Claus for some reason.
He's got like a Santa vest.
Yeah.
But with plenty of room to see the chest.
I assume it was a jacket, but he just got too ripped. And it's just like, this jacket is now a vest.
It's a mess. And there's a Pegasus definitely behind him.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
That is definitely like over his shoulder. And I like they put a little gray in his beard because what I keyed in on, because I'm a plot point key in on person, as you said 20 years ago they used to date. Yep. I was like, this is a mature people's love story.
Oh, yeah. It's very crazy. They do everything. With this particular author is not an actual person. It's like 5 different authors. They all go under the name Zoe Chant, and it's wild. Like they all have their own things. Some of them are really into bears for some reason. There's one called Barista. Oh, it is a man who turns into a bear.
This is fucking great.
He's undercover as a barista.
He's undercover because he solves crimes?
He solves crimes.
God damn.
A woman saw a murder by a polar bear man, and she was like, I saw the murder, and they're like, we got to put you in witness protection. And by that, we just mean we're going to have this guy work beside you at the coffee shop.
This is great. You know what? I think, do you anticipate having guests on Fingering the Page?
I don't know. Right now, our goal is like we're going to put out like 10 episodes and then be like, what do we like? Because right now we're loving it. We're enjoying it, Yeah. One of our things was to call up zoologists and be like, hey, is this for real, yo?
We're not suggesting. We are asking. Yeah.
We're just curious, man. Like, we read one book called Koalified for Love. It is a man who turns into a koala. He is from Australia, too.
Great.
For some reason, all of his family members are real bears. And I was like, koalas aren't even like actual bears. They're marsupials. But I looked at koalas and I was like, man, they are carriers of chlamydia. Big time. They are carrying chlamydia everywhere.
Now we know why. Because they be fucking.
Yeah.
Well, I can't wait.
Yeah, I'm very excited
for this to be released. What is the date of the release? 17,
18, 19, 20. 21st.
The 21st.
Yeah.
So as people are listening to this, you can go right now and listen to Fingering the Page, episode at least 1.
Episode
we know
1.
There's 10 more coming.
Yeah.
Follow them everywhere.
Please do.
As for us...
Oh yeah.
We're getting greased up for this history, baby.
Here we go.
Before we jump in, you, as a bookworm, you fingered the pages per your reputation. Yep. And you read a book called A MiG-15 to Freedom, written by
Yep.
No Kum Suk, the
Yep.
very guy who flew that thing in. I would like to hear from you why you originally chose our
Okay.
guy, No Kum Suk, and what, going forward, as we fuck this history for our listeners, you are most curious to know about.
Sure. So my wife and I were in Seattle. We went to the Flight Museum and we were walking around, and they have the actual plane there. It was in Ohio, and I guess they moved to Seattle at some point. But that story really interested me. It's always weird, like, I guess defection stories are always like interesting to me, like no matter where they happen. Like, but like that one was particularly odd because like you pointed out, like he flew onto an American Air Force base or aircraft carrier, I can't remember which, but they didn't shoot him down because he flew in from the wrong direction. Like they're just like, what? And like he landed, and then they were like, oh hey,
Ooh.
what's going on here?
Yeah.
All right. Very tense situation. And that like was very odd. I was like, I gotta look this guy up. And like there's a lot of stuff about him on the internet and stuff like that. You're just like, whoa, that's an insane story. And like just very cool. Like I'm always like interested in like also like cultural, like I don't know the right word, but like somebody going into a new culture and be like, okay, all right, this is what you guys do. Okay, we'll figure this
how
out.
we do it.
I'll
Okay.
figure it out. Yeah, let's do this. Okay.
Yeah.
So that stuff's always interesting to me. I'm always like kind of like my grandmother immigrated here from the Philippines, so it's always like, oh, was that like a weird culture shock for you,
Yeah.
or was that like cool? And it's like kind of like both, a little bit of both, you know?
Yeah. You know, it's crazy. The Philippines factor into this story.
Yeah.
It's peripheral, but they're in there a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so fascinating.
So cool.
I love it. I have my source. I have a book called The Great Leader and the Fighter Pilot by Blaine Harden, which I listened to. And it's also kind of a HILF on how this book got written. So this guy, Blaine Harden, in 2015 writes The Great Leader and the Fighter Pilot. And he writes it in part because he had already written a book about North Korea, and it was from a guy who had escaped from one of the labor camps, and it was called Escape from Camp 14. And that book made a huge splash. And No Kum Suk reads this book about this guy from Escaping Camp 14 and contacts the author and is like, hey, have you by any chance heard this story about the guy who stole the MiG-15? And he was like, no, I don't know this story. And so he found then a particularly great biographer who took what is hopefully, you know, the story that he wrote in his biography, the MiG-15 to Freedom, as well as available history about North Korea in general, and specifically Kim Il-sung, the great leader, the first authoritarian dictator in North Korea.
Yeah.
And this book sort of parallels No's life during World War II and the rise of North Korea along with Kim Il-sung, and it is fucking fascinating.
Yeah.
I also read a couple articles, some stuff that you can all find in the show notes. You'll find articles about the specifics on how North and South Korea split up. I got some very dark and twisted stories from the ground during the Korean War from both sides. All of this you can read more about. If you want to click on the show notes, you can find that stuff. But with all of that research and with my friend Andy, here's my plan.
Okay.
For the history fucking ahead of us. First thing I want to do is I'm going to go into kind of the history and geography of Korea in general, because I realized as we approach this that I know very little about kind of North Korean history in general and nothing about pre-World War II North Korea. And so I'm going to kind of get us locked into the geography and the general history because it is so helpful to know why No Kum Suk did what he did, how he did what he did, and why it was such a big fucking deal to like everybody involved at the time.
I asked a friend of mine, my friend Diana, you know, she's Korean American, but like she's, you know, her mom's from Korea and everything. And I was asking her, I was like, oh, is there anything I should know about South Korea? She was like, well, Korea was like been colonized for like a long time, like but even before the North Koreans, like because Japan held it, right? Like since like Japan had attacked it several times apparently, and then like 1910, they're like, we win, we got you now.
Yeah, no, it really and even just looking at it, right? You can see in the geography, it starts to make sense. So one of the things I want to do is I'm going to start with like a sort of a mini geography lesson, just so that we all know what we're looking at.
Sure.
Then we're going to get into the cockpit.
Okay.
With
like
No,
it.
and we're going to fly this shit. We're going to go kind of through the whole thing, how he got there, and then we're going to look at what the Americans were thinking and what they knew as he landed. what happened to him in his life after. And then I have some very cool fuckable little nuggets about some of the CIA agents that handled No Kumsuk after he got to the United States, and some U.S. Marines who, over the course of our relationship with Korea, found the exact opposite reasoning and defected from South Korea to North Korea. There, believe it or not, there's a handful of dudes who just were like, fuck this, and went into North Korea, and they have an interesting story to tell as well. Are you ready to fuck?
I'm ready.
All right.
Let's do it, Dawn.
Come with me, Andy.
Okay.
February 22nd, 1948.
Okay.
You and me and our listeners are attendees. We're high school students at Hanam High School in North Korea. Okay. And we can see this guy, handsome-ish. He's about 35 years old. He is a well-known North Korean revolutionary, and he's standing on top of this giant mountain of fertilizer. And man, I have tried, I promise you, to find an image of what it looked like, that specific one, let alone just a North Korean pile of fertilizer. I'm like, what is this? All I can tell you is it's not shit.
Yeah.
It's definitely like mostly chemical, and it's hard. And what he's had them do is like cut off the top so it's flat, so he can stand on top of it as like a stage. Okay. And if you and I are there and we're listening to this guy, we would probably dig him. Okay. Because he is saying things like, you young people, you are the prime movers of society. The reason he's on this pile of fertilizer is because, bitch, he brought this.
Yeah.
Like, we need this. North Korea is mostly arid, mountainous, very hard to grow shit. And without fertilizer like this, a lot of people starve. And people do off and on, but not now, because we got this guy that brings us all this fertilizer. Hot dog. Promoted mass literacy in the last couple of years that he's been rising. Mass literacy. Banned child labor, promoting equal pay and equal work for women.
Whoa.
Girl, 1948.
Yeah.
Man. The only people who really seem to hate his guts are religious fanatics, because he's also sort of banned religion. And super rich capitalists, because he's redistributing wealth. Okay. And those folks have been kind of getting out of Dodge. This guy standing on top of the fertilizer is Kim Il-sung.
Okay.
He is not yet the authoritarian dictator who jails and murders his rivals and prohibits free speech, doesn't let people travel freely, and promoting he's not that guy yet. But there's like, boy, howdy, there's glimmers, okay? Because you and I had to come.
Sure.
We didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
If we didn't want to come to this. He is circled by 3 rings of dudes with machine guns, and everybody follows him around with a giant portrait of him. So
just trying to get the word out. It's poor Instagram. He had to get his face out there somewhere.
Yeah,
somehow.
He's promoting, hey guys. It's before you could do a hey guys.
Love that. That's his TikTok.
Exactly. And next to us in this crowd of high school students is a 16-year-old kid named No Kumsuk, who will be one of the greatest humiliations in Kim Il-sung's life.
Yeah.
Kim Il-sung is the granddaddy. He's the OG. His son was Kim Jong-il.
Yeah.
Also not great. And his grandson, who is currently in leading North Korea, is Kim Jong-un.
And he's the guy who's really good friends with the basketball player from the Bulls, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And sends love letters to Donald Trump, which is appropriate. Yeah. And he's kind of adorable, I'm not going to lie. He's kind of an adorable, squishy little dude.
Have you seen that face?
I don't like that he's going to nuke us at all, and I don't like that he has nukes at all, but I do find Kim Jong-un a little bit like a polar bear. Yeah. Where I'm like, so dangerous. Yeah. You just kind of okay, so that's sort of the our story to sort of get us in the mood. Okay. Right. I mentioned the geography. So if you are driving and you are not, you're just trying to visualize. Andy and I are in your ears, and you have no way of like referencing a map. Or you're my friend Jen in a zoo. Hi, Jen. And you're feeding a giant animal. Here's what I want you to do in your brain to figure out what we're doing. Now spin the globe. Okay, stop on Europe. Cute. Mm-hmm. We know Europe. We all backpack. Our friends, England, Denmark, we know all those. Then you go east and you get the Mediterranean hot, and the Middle East spooky. And then, inevitably, if you have spent any time spinning a globe or even looking at a flat map, you're like, fuck, Russia's fucking huge.
So big.
Russia's so fucking big.
It's so big.
And it's just like big and it's right there. And it goes from all the way to the east coast of Russia is shared with China. Russia sits on top of China way over on the east coast. They share a long stretch of border on their eastern side. Okay. Korea, the Korean peninsula, when we're not distinguishing from the north or the south, the Korean peninsula is off of mainland China.
Okay.
And the line between China and North Korea is the Yalu River. So if you're on one side of the Yalu River, you're in China, Manchuria area of China. And if you're on the other side of the Yalu River, you're in North Korea. And if you follow the Yalu River north, 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 as far as it goes, you kiss Russia. Yeah. So there's just a tiny, like, little smidgen at the top of that river where Russia, China, and North Korea,
they're fun.
They all hold hands.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so the peninsula then of Korea hangs down. And if you do like Taylor Swift heart hands, okay, and then you make it less of a heart and move your hands apart, your left hand is the Korean peninsula, divided between the north and south at about your knuckles. And your right hand is Japan.
Okay.
Okay. The reason why I want to get that geography all set up is because over the last 40 years, as an American, and a Western power, right? Our knee-jerk reactions to who's our friend and who's our enemy and who's a good guy and who's a bad guy has flipped many, many times. China, Russia, and Japan.
Right.
Right. We love them. We hate them. They're on our side. They're not on our side. So like, fuck all that and just look at where they are. And you can, and that will like help us enormously as we move forward.
For sure.
So as my friend Andy mentioned, North Korea and South Korea is a distinction nobody ever have made ever for a millennia. There is no normal reason why North and South Korea would have been divided.
Right.
It was unified for over 500 years under the Chosun dynasty. And that things were 505 years, Andy.
Yeah.
Of unification and peace. That's twice as long as America's even been a thing.
That's 5 generations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were doing great. But then the Industrial Revolution, the 1880s, they just didn't adjust well. And there were like internal strife and they didn't promote. So they just shut down and they started getting called the Hermit Kingdom by everybody because they were just kind of like, fuck, we don't like it and we don't get it. And they're just like, we're not going to do it.
Yeah.
But again, if you look at our geography, you're right. Your ass is sticking out of China and you can't just be like, I'm not going to do it, right?
Right. Japan could do that for a while because they were like an island nation. You can't do that when you're part of a whole other bunch of countries.
And even Japan didn't work very well. So what naturally happens is everyone starts being like, okay, so who's going to get Korea? Somebody's got to get Korea. Who's going to get it? And it turns out Russia and Japan fought at first for who gets Korea.
Right.
Okay. And what's nuts is that in 1905, U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt.
Wait, I'm sorry, real quick. Is this like the song Two Princes, where it's like before you stands two princes, both who adore you. Just go ahead now.
Absolutely. When you and I teach this class in high school, I'm gonna be like, hit it, Andy, and then we'll do and that's when they'll know.
We just play the guitar solo with our mouth.
Oh my God. Okay,
marry him
perfect.
Or marry me.
Only the difference is Korea has no choice.
Yeah.
They don't actually get to decide.
Also, neither country believes in princes. We just want to let you know that they're pretty anti-royalty.
We'll let you know. It's like that scene in Die Hard where he says, when we commandeer your men, we'll try to let you know.
Yeah.
But there is this fight and Russia and Japan are fighting. And I just found this crazy. Even as like somebody who likes to think that I have kind of my finger on the pulse of like a lot of the broad sweeps of history, I was broadsided by this one.
Yeah.
Not only did I not know that Theodore Roosevelt negotiated the deal.
Oh, I didn't know that.
For who owns Korea between Russia and Japan. He fucking won the Nobel Peace Prize for it.
You know?
I mean, that's just when you talk about the turning wheel and when you're like, we as America simply are allies and we cannot believe that you would ever wonder how we could turn our backs on our allies. You're like, come on. Every 30, 40 years, we're like, fuck these guys.
Teddy didn't really have a lot of competition at the time for Nobel Peace Prize.
And part of the reason, it's true. And part of the reason why Teddy was kind of down with this was because if we're going to be deciding like who owns stuff, it'd be great because we'd really like to own the Philippines.
You know?
And so so everything drives. So Japan, Imperial Japan, colonizes and occupies Korea from 1905 until 1945.
Yeah.
And sort of like any occupier, right? There's like an occupier's playbook. They do the primo stuff. They ban Korean language. They force everybody to learn Japanese. The culture, the architecture, the food. Ethnic Koreans are second-class citizens. They got to give up their seats on the bus.
Oh.
They are confined to a servant class. Maybe you get an education, but only if it really serves the Imperial Japan.
Why did Japan do that? Like the Roman Empire, that was like one of the bigger empires, and wasn't like their whole thing like you can continue to be whatever you want to be, but you're part of us. You can do your language, your religions. I don't care. Yeah. But just continue part. You're still part of us. Mm-hmm. Whereas like, why did Japan like no? You will be learning. You will just be Japanese, but not fully. You won't be a full citizen of Japan necessarily.
Really good question.
When I was at the medical university. Meeting with the international residents, and there's a lot of tax treaties with different countries, and we kind of have to go with country of origin or country of like where you were last living rather than country of origin. And I remember meeting with a guy. He was from Japan. He had lived in Japan most of his life, and I was like, okay, we have to list you as being from Japan. And he was like, I'm Korean. I was like, no, I understand that, but for tax purposes, you are Japanese. He was like, I don't think so. I was like, no, you are. That's how we have to treat you. He's like, Japanese people don't like Koreans. And I was like, I don't know, man. I just know
this is a residency kind of thing.
This is a residency thing. I was like, you were born and raised there, right? And you still live there. He's like, yes. I was like, that's why I have to do this. He's like, okay, but they would not agree with you. I was like, luckily they're not here. Like I had to say that.
That's
I was
really
like, they're not here, and I completely understand what you're saying. I just, for tax purposes, you are Japan, which is good because you don't have to pay taxes here for 2 years because you're presumably paying it back to Japan, but for now. And he was like, okay,
I don't know, this isn't
I was like, this is gonna get
well.
back, they're not gonna like that.
Really,
and I was like, I don't tell you.
I would love to think more about that. My hunch is that two things.
Yeah.
One is that it was in Rome's best interest to keep the powerful people in the places that they were colonizing and occupying powerful, which meant they kind of, if they already had a grasp on things, it would just be, you just pay us taxes. We just want you to send us a bulk of goods. We want to have the rights and privileges to move through your territory. Whereas for Imperial Japan, it was, we want you to be ours and us.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that's my guess. It probably has as much to do with like economic stuff as like cultural stuff. But there was a way, to your point, it wasn't complete domination because you could, if you had chosen the path of assimilation, if you were like, you know what, it's kind of a thin line. Yeah. Right. And like the Japanese are doing some good stuff because if you wanted to paint it as good or bad, they're building tons of infrastructure. Right. They're building tons of factories because that was kind of the deal. Korea was like not progressing. That was the whole point. They weren't moving ahead and they weren't industrializing and they weren't modernizing.
Right.
So Japan comes in, and if you look at progress as jobs and stuff being built, then you'd have to say, this is progress. They also, to be fair, they brought baseball. And they really and they love Teddy Roosevelt. So they're also teaching English in schools. And if you're an American looking at this history, you're like, yeah, that looks pretty good. But of course we hate occupiers. Yeah. And if you're going to resist Japan, chances are you left. Right. If you could, and you went to the other side of the Yalu River, and you are resisting Japan from China, from Manchuria. And frankly, China and Manchuria are nervous about this because, again, from a contemporary standpoint, it's hard to imagine that Japan made it go at China. Right. Because he's a tiny girl. Yeah. And because you and I were both born after Hiroshima. So it's hard to imagine Japan swinging its stick around. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's like, what the fuck? But yes, in 1931, Japan made a try for China. And after they got to the Yalu River, they started to burst in and try to make some gains in Manchuria. And China was like, fuck no. It's why when World War II starts, Japan is like, okay, so now Germany can't just like own Poland. Right. What? You're going to be like, we can't just own Korea. And the United States has turned a new leaf and is like, yes, no. Right. You can't. Nobody can.
Yeah.
Right? And China joins the United States because they're just got fucking invaded by Japan. So it explains in hindsight how some of these, stuff sort of laid itself out.
So in the situation with Korea, and Japan taking over Korea and making them assimilate everything, is that kind of like a trad wife situation? Is that what that was?
I'm not sure what that is.
Trad wife? Oh, it's this weird thing where some women are like, I just want to live under my husband's control. And
yes, it's kind of a fundy.
It used to be traditional wife, and now they're calling them trad wives. I'm like, stop making them sound cool.
I will tell you this, though. In our story, Kim Il-sung is the resistor.
Right.
Part of his legend, the reason he gets his ass to the top of that fertilizer heap and becomes the great leader is because he first resisted Japan. And a lot of his legends and a lot of the stories that allowed him to rise to heroic status are bullshit, but not all of them.
Right.
And one of the things that made him so attractive to the people that followed him is that during this period of time of Japanese occupation, he fucking stuck it to the Japanese. Right. So World War II, I want to spoil it for you.
Yeah. What happened?
Well, we fucking nuked Japan twice in 3 days.
Okay.
Yeah. So August 6th and 9th, Hiroshima and then Nagasaki. Surprise. Not right. End of World War II. What happens in Korea at that point? You can imagine.
Yeah.
First of all, they fucking saw it. Then all of your occupiers are gone, and the Russians are the first ones to come in. And these guys, bless their hearts, not the nicest, most refined dudes. They don't know the difference between Japanese people and Korean people. Neither do most of the people in Wisconsin, right? You know what I mean?
Sure.
So, and they are raping and burning and stealing and looting and all of the worst kind of stereotype, like soldiers rushing into a place.
Yeah.
The allies, our victorious allies, America just grabs China's hand and grabs Russia's hands, and we raise them in victory. We're like, you guys, we did it.
Yeah.
We really did it. No, you did it. Right? Okay, bye.
Yeah.
The Cold War, which is the pretty much immediate global fight between communism and capitalism. You know, from Berlin, that wall went up fucking fast because it was, hey, Russia, hey, bestie, hey, US, what's going on? Totally, we want everybody to be free and independent. Can't wait. Until then, why don't we just split these for the protection?
Yeah, just for now.
And we just keep them safe from like Nazis or whatever.
Yeah.
The way I can imagine is like the Cold War was like a bad breakup where there's like the phase where like we're not allies in war anymore, but we will be friends forever. And then phase 2 is fucking die. I never want to see you or a trace of you ever fucking again. And there's like this friend zone period. There's like this very awkward where like you get divorced, but you still live in the same house.
Right.
Kind of phase, which is 1945 to about 1948. It's like 3 years where the United States and Russia are pretending like that we're not about to go at it. And during this phase, Russia's like, yes, I agree. We all want Korea to be free and independent under our control. And America's like, couldn't agree with you more. We totally can't wait for the moment that Korea is free, united, and independent and completely under our control. And when it comes down to, so who controls what part? Get this. 2 men from the CIA are told, find the line. Find out how we split it. They sit down in a hotel room with a pack of cigarettes and a National Geographic fucking magazine.
What?
Yep. And go, how about that? That looks about half-seas. It makes sense because it's on a line of latitude. To your point, they say, what do you think, Russia? And Russia, to everyone's surprise, it's like, great. Because guess they don't have the Koreans' best interests at heart either.
No.
And what they don't know, because they don't fucking know Korea, is that even though it's kind of technically half and half, the northern half is unfarmable, rocky, arid mountains. And the south is much greener and a large source of the food.
Yeah.
Right? So we have quickly the communists in the north try to find a Korean, of course, who will appear outside and inside, to not be a Russian China puppet, but a free, independent Korean who just wants the whole thing to be united. And it's Kim Il-sung, the liberator, the resistor, the guy you already love, and they boo, 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 boo. In the South, we get a guy named Syngman Rhee, who is first and foremost anti-communist.
Yeah.
He will die on that hill. He fucking hates communism, and it does seem to be pretty real and authentic to him.
Right.
He's also an authoritarian.
Okay, that's not so good.
But we love
But so was Mussolini, and he was bad too.
He was bad too.
Okay, well,
Stalin, no. How? No. All right.
Okay,
no,
well,
not great.
all right.
But you can see how these two, it becomes a real thing.
Yeah.
War starts 3 years later, 1950. Kim Il-sung invades South Korea. Now, currently in North Korea, their history books say, no, that didn't happen. South Korea invaded North Korea first.
Of course.
And there is a lot of like history that is debatable, and there's good guy, bad guy stuff, but that we know is not true. North Korea definitely picked this fight. The Soviet Union and China supplied North Korea with all the weapons and all the training and all the planes while trying to be like, totally not us. They're totally free and independent. This is on them. They love it.
They did this,
They
yeah.
did this, right? And for the next few years, Mao in China and Stalin in Russia are sort of fickle. They're like, yeah, totally. We totally need to win. But do we really? Is this worth a nuclear war? And then do we even need this? But then China would be like, we definitely love having this giant peninsula between us and Japan. And then there's egos. We just can't fucking let those fucks.
Yeah.
Who knows? But it's 3 years of fighting.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
For a while. I read this interesting tidbit in the book that I thought was really funny. One, I didn't know that a white Russian is not just a drink. It's also the way Russians describe people who are like, oh, I don't want to be communist. I'm just Russian. They're like, no, you're not. And they're like, I am. They're like, well, you're a white Russian. Then I was like, I don't really get this, but okay.
Like,
It sounds
delicious.
Good. Yeah. So like one of his
really
Korean
weird.
friends got like got dismissed basically because they found out he was dating a white Russian or whatever.
Crazy.
And they're like, no, you're a non-person now, which I had to look that one up too. And I was like,
Non-person. Wild.
non-person apparently is like somebody who's like, you're disappearing. You
It's
don't
like a
know.
Scientologist
Yeah.
kind of designation.
So wild. And then also they said the North Koreans would not allow the soldiers to like date during the war because they were like, there's a lot of like South Korean spies amongst these women. Please don't do this.
Yeah.
And he said like one of his friends was like, I think we went a little too far with the communism here. Just gonna point that out.
Yeah, and also like that was a North Korean thing because the Russians be fucking.
Oh yeah. Oh for sure.
The Russians were like, our communism, we smoke, we fuck,
Yeah.
we don't know what you're doing.
He said during the training they were relying on the Russians for like their vodka and stuff like that because they weren't allowed to drink or whatever.
Yeah.
The Russians were like, oh, we'll hook you up, bud. Don't worry.
Yeah, we're much looser. And you know how much shitty and crazy your country has to be for communist Russia to seem like a real fun and easygoing group of guys. Yikes.
Yeah. Real rough.
And also there's like, I mentioned that North Korea invaded South Korea and that's why the war started, which is absolutely true.
Yeah.
Also, I was on my heels with how really bad guy stuff the U.S. did in Korea.
Yeah.
I am not a purist. Like I'm aware of some of the most dastardly and heinous things that have been perpetrated on behalf of not just the United States, like in general, but specifically the U.S. military and the U.S. government. But this was pretty abominable.
What happened?
Once the war started, because we were taken by surprise. Even though there was tension, the United States and the UN were like, whoa, fuck. And the UN was a new thing. When the UN was formed in 1949, that was sort of the clue, the biggest unmissable clue to all the powers that be that like people are congealing together to fight some sort of military war. But still, they didn't really expect there to be a big provocation. So once the North Koreans started, fucking Kim Il-sung kicked ass, man. And those first few weeks of the war, they pretty much scoured south, taking land and getting down to the point where there's just like this tiny little foothold of like U.S. power, South Korea. And then Kim Il-sung fucks it up because he's actually not very good at this. And he's too fast. He's constantly over his skis. He doesn't wait for things to be repaired. He doesn't look ahead to find out if things work. And what happens is the U.S. is like, fuck, we do the real like commando, like, no.
Yeah.
and push north to the point where it's like the opposite. Like if you look at the speeding of the map, it's like, I mean, it's eerie.
I was surprised like how many times in the book he was like, they took Pyongyang, and I was like, again,
yeah. And the U.S. carpet bombs.
Oh yeah.
So the U.S. once we kind of like, oh, it's on, right? The U.S. commits absolute war crimes in North Korea. They carpet bomb. It's described, and no Kum-suk describes it this way because he sees it.
Yeah.
They basically go back and forth. It's described like a lawnmower. Just going, they level, they turn around, they shift a few degrees, and they go back. They destroyed over 85% of all structures in North Korea.
Whoa.
Hundreds of thousands of civilians killed.
Jeez.
And they use napalm, which is a chemical designed to burn human skin and is a torturous, awful way to die and hadn't been used in a minute. It kind of had a revival in Vietnam. And if you're wondering, like, how bad could it be? General MacArthur, who oversaw World War II, was a fucking like cigar chewing war humper.
Sure.
Said it made him sick when he saw what we did in North Korea. And that's in the air. It was just indiscriminate. On the ground, though, our U.S. Marines walk into a meat grinder. The suffering that they had is also blew my hair back. 59,246 American dead. Over 8,000 are still missing in action. Those numbers, Andy, are about the same as Vietnam.
Whoa.
And the Korean War was a third of the time.
Yeah.
There's one battle in particular called Pork Chop Hill, which is worse than some of the worst trench warfare of World War I. It was like 1,500 guys went in and like 12 walked out of one unit. I mean, it's nuts.
Yeah.
Crazy,
That's awful. Pork Chop Hill needs to change that name. That can't be it sounds like a level of Mario Brothers.
Although with your sideburns, I feel like you could start calling yourself Pork Chop Hill. Like when you give your wife oral sex, you could say, climb up onto pork.
She'll be like, what's oral sex? I'm like, well, that's the thing we'll have to discuss.
Here, this is Dawn's number. Give her a call. We are doing so good in the air. As you know, we're just killing everyone and we're destroying everything, which is great. But we are occasionally getting shot at.
Oh, yeah.
By these planes called MiGs.
Yeah.
Now, because no one is articulating for decades that Russia is involved at all, these MiGs, they're flying, North Koreans, and we don't know how they work, and we would stop dying in the air, and they'd stop if we could just get one of these fucking things.
Yeah.
Then we take it apart, we figure out how it works, and then we'll be even better. And they can't get one. And they can't get one. And no one can get one. And the Russians know, boy, howdy, we can't get caught. So they have very special ways of destroying their planes if it looks like it's going to get caught. And then on September 21st, 1953, a MiG-15 lands right in their fucking laps.
Yes.
Hey, as I record this, it's only a couple weeks after the major fires that struck Los Angeles, where I live, and so many of you reached out to ensure that I and my family were safe, and it really touched my heart. I thank you for that, and know that we are home and we ourselves, we're safe throughout the worst of it. We are grateful that we get to be a source of refuge and support for those who were not so fortunate. And it will touch you, I think, to know that so many of my fellow Angelinos stood up to help that volunteers have been waitlisted. I know, right? That being said, the need is still great, and it's also going to be ongoing. So in the show notes to this episode, you'll find several links to various ways that you can help if you are able and so inclined. You're also going to find ways to support the pod, but, I don't want to be a cunt, so just give them your money and...
Follow me, follow me, follow me, follow. Follow me, follow me, follow me, follow. Follow me, follow me, follow me, follow. Follow me, follow me, follow me, follow.
All right, so we are back. We've had a geography lesson.
Yep.
We had a history lesson that went from fuck, Imperial Japan through World War II, Hiroshima, fucking nailed
Yeah.
it. Now I want to kind of place our guy,
Yeah.
into that history so that we kind of see where he rolled through it all. So he is born in 1932. So not only is he born under Imperial Japanese rule, but so is his dad.
Yeah.
You know, this is the second generation. And his dad is one of them assimilators who's kind of doing great.
Yeah.
He works for one of them Japanese companies.
Yep.
They have a better than most house. He has a better than most education. His dad plays baseball.
Oh, yeah.
And Imperial Japan was also super authoritarian and like dictating, loyalty to Japan and the imperviousness of their emperor and stuff. And as like an early teen, like 12, 13, Noah kind of buys into this. And during World War II, he goes to his dad and he's like, Dad, I'm fucking in. And I think I want to become a kamikaze pilot. And his dad is like, fuck, what? No, we fake it. We're fucking faking it, man. You don't do that.
Yeah.
We read their dumb books and we wear their dumb fucking clothes and we keep our mouths shut, but we don't fly our bodies into a submarine.
No.
No.
Take care of yourselves. Be smart.
Be smart. And I find that as such a fascinating little tidbit from his youth because it explains sort of his relationship with his dad and also his relationship to what is right, what is wrong, and what you should do. And it is a very self-preservationist future.
Right.
That makes sense. And it's one of the questions I'm going to ask you kind of throughout.
Okay.
Your thoughts whenever they come up to you, which is whether or not No Kum Suk is a hero.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a really interesting question and one I sort of waffled.
He's definitely a guy with like a really interesting take on things and like you're like, oh, okay, I don't know. Like,
I don't know.
Yeah.
And it depends, of course, on what you define as a hero, but
Right.
I think it's arguable that he is not. That he is a very self-serving, lucky guy with a fascinating story, but not necessarily someone to whom you look for inspiration.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's the I guess the human spirit and everything. You're like, oh, that's cool. He did it. He pushed through,
Great
got out of it. Yeah. But at the same time, you're like, okay, what did he save other people? It's like, no, not really. What did he do? It's like, well, he kind of played the part until he could get out. And it was like, oh, okay, like somebody escapes from prison. You're like, oh, that's an interesting story. But you're never like, that guy is one of the best.
Yeah. I mean, that's always the thing with spies, defectors, turncoats is you're kind of like, great. I mean, even our guy, Benedict Arnold.
Yeah.
Right. Was like, the British were never like, what a guy. They were kind of like, you fucked your friends. Like, we appreciate it.
Yeah, they're like, we want you. We don't want you that much.
Yeah, not
you're
that
just going to
great.
live by yourself. See you later.
And this, you can imagine Noah's 13, 14 when Hiroshima and the end of World War II and his dad, and we're in the friend zone. If you remember that 3-year period where the communists and America are just kind of like, I still think we can really hold it together. And you could travel freely.
Yeah.
We had drawn the line between North and South Korea, but you could still travel freely. And Noah's dad goes to South Korea to see if he can maybe collect on his pension from his Japanese job, which I think is a very ambitious idea.
Yeah.
But you would go,
okay.
And he didn't. They were like, buddy, we nuked Japan.
Yeah.
We're not going to live up to whatever. Nah. But while he was there, he couldn't help but notice it looked really fucking great. Kind of fun.
Yeah.
And Americans in particular kind of curled Noah's dad's toes. And when he came back to North Korea, he was like, buddy, I mean, I really think South Korea's got it going on. And it was the first time in Noah's life that he said to himself, it's sort of arbitrary that I'm in North Korea. It's just the luck of the draw that I happen to live here when this particular dictator came to power. I'm going to go south as soon as I can.
Sure.
And he realizes at that same time, similar to the Japanese, that you can get in good with the Russians by just telling them what they want to hear.
Oh, big time. Lots of telling the Russians what they want to hear.
Yeah,
Lots of that.
Lots of, oh, you're looking for, cigarettes? I can help you find cigarettes. You want booze? I can help you find booze. So he finds his way in there. And then his dad dies, and he goes to live with his uncle, who is very communist.
Yeah.
And this is when
Hardcore.
you and I met him at that story at the beginning at Hanum High School, when he first sees Kim Il-sung speak. And his uncle is like, oh, right?
Yeah.
You show up early. You work your ass off. You show them what a good communist you are. You speak out against other people,
Mm-hmm.
celebrate Mao and Stalin and Kim Il-sung all the time, vocally,
Yeah.
you know, physically, all this stuff. And one of the best things you can do, of course, is join the army.
Yep.
So he joins the Korean People's Army. And this is where
17, right? 17 years old. Yeah.
he sees that carpet bombing I talked about.
Yeah.
And he is now in the mud, dodging bombs, watching North Korea be utterly decimated, civilian areas.
There's one part he talks about. He says that like the carpet bombing, like he was like right there. He's like, oh, it's coming. And then thankfully they like either, I don't know if they ran out or what, but they were just like, let's turn around. He's like, oh, thank God. Because I was right. Like I would have been next. That would have been it.
I mean, it's like that's, you know, you imagine a moment like that, like the cinematic version of when the train just like to a stop and kicks up dust on your toes, you know? And he's thinking to himself, has my mom just been murdered by these bombs? Most of the people were staying in their homes, and just because where else are you going to go?
Yeah.
And he is following with his troops into caves and fucking hungry. And then an opportunity comes to join the Air Force. We need people to fly. And he's like, yes, please. And the first test.
Yeah.
So keep in mind, none of these guys have ever been in a plane. Almost none of them have even driven a car.
Right.
So the math, the understanding of like operating a machine is as remote as it can get. The first test to just see who might be qualified to even start flight school was the drinking game that I remember playing, where you put a broomstick on your forehead and you put the broom down, you spin around in circles a number of times, and then you have to try to walk in a straight line. That was like a guy with a clipboard was like, He also had to lie because when he even just to get into the Korean People's Army, he studied and he got up early and he learned everything. And he was like, yes, I know exactly what I need to do. And he flunked the first test. And when he was looking back, I was like, why did I flunk? And he was like, I did everything right. The only thing I can think of is I mentioned that my dad worked for a Japanese company.
Right.
So he went back and took the test again and lied about his dad. And he got in.
Which they didn't have Google, so they couldn't be like, let's look this up real quick.
And even the paper they had was probably not in great shape, right? So he is like, yes, raises his hand, spins his head around on the broom handle, and he gets out of the cave and out of the mud and out of the dirt, out of the trenches, and sent to Manchuria with these Russians who they eat better, they have better. I mean, it is right away a better deal.
It's wild because he keeps talking about, he's like, oh man, they would eat bread just caked in butter and sardine, or it was sardines? No, it was what's the fish eggs? Caviar. He was like just caked in that stuff, and he's like, I loved it. I was like, that sounds gross, but I'm glad you liked it. It's very rich. Good job.
It's good. At least it's food.
Yeah, right? It's food. It's definitely food.
And they're trying. I mean, most of the guys who fly planes right now, we're not much more qualified than these guys. No. So we actually, as people, and I mean this kind of regardless of what country you're from, you got to train somebody to fly a fighter jet. We kind of know. It takes about 6 months. Yeah. Okay. It takes about 100 hours, and it takes about 6 months, and you have to wake up every day, and these many out flight times, and then you learn this part, and there's a process. Yeah. And Kim Il-sung said, cut it in half. So in addition to all the other hurdles, he just didn't allow these guys. Okay, so that was like phase one. Phase two is within the North Korean Air Force, you didn't get promoted based on skill.
No. Networking?
Yeah. your devoutness to communism.
Yeah.
So if you hit yourself hard enough and cried passionately enough and spoke, confidently enough, that was what got you into a flight suit and not how good you were.
There's several times he talks about, like, he was like, how did this guy get promoted? He's like, I'm obviously a better pilot than this person. He's like, that guy just hangs out with the right people and just keeps like screaming communist, like, diatribe all the time. That's why he got promoted. I was like, why do you care? You're trying to leave.
Totally. They also lie, like, because there's not great, well, there's two motivations, right? So they'd go up there in the sky facing these American Sabre pilots who were infinitely better. Yeah. And the Russians in their MiGs were pretty fair. They would put up a good fight. But the Koreans, almost to the person, would just run. They'd see a Sabre and they would just turn and get the fuck out of there. They'd fire a few bullets so that they weren't coming back with a completely full gun. And then they started to learn you could just say, I think I shot down 2.
Yeah.
I think maybe 7. That I think actually 15. I think I got like 15. And because the commanders were under such pressure to give these numbers to the great leader, yeah, they're doing great. They're shooting. They'd be like, great, great. And then you'd be promoted. Oh, so there's no reason to tell the truth. There's no reason to actually get good.
Which also, the promotion thing is weird because like a lot of them were wearing the Chinese uniforms, which don't have your insignia or whatever on it. So you're just like, that guy could be the general for all I know, or he could be an infantryman. I don't know. I don't know what they are. So like, what's the point of the promotion? It's like, well, they know you by your face. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, and they do get some better stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You might get some benefit in some way, but yeah.
But then you still got to worry because there was like, he said there was like a Russian general who would like walk around with a camera, but he wasn't taking pictures. He was just keeping his camera because he wanted somebody to steal it from his bunk or whatever. And I was like, you're the general, dude. This is something you still have to be like, oh, people love stealing my stuff. All right.
Also imagine the consequences for being caught stealing.
Right?
Right?
So crazy.
Well, and I mean, and it would make you crazy. And that is one of the things that No Kumsuk talks about is just sort of almost like a vertigo in terms of like, what am I doing? Who am I? Am I a good guy? Who am I? You know, you start to lie externally enough.
Oh, yeah.
Things get weird with your mental health, you know? I actually do believe that he is deeply anti-communist.
Yes, for sure.
I think that is one of the truest things like that you can rely on because I think that he had a bone to pick with the way his dad was treated in his dad's final years. And he's clearly a self-assured dude with a big imagination and like plans for himself. And that general identity doesn't do well.
No. He's clearly intelligent. He speaks several different languages, I think, throughout the, you know, and it's like all this stuff. And at the same time, like he's like, and also he's seeing like, oh, you guys have no honor because you're just like promoting people because they lied to you and you're okay with it. And that doesn't make sense to me. I think there's definitely a part of him that's like very independent and he's very much like, what are we doing this for? I don't understand any of this. So I think that definitely like rubs him raw and he's like, we're not. Yeah.
And I think even if he, for whatever reason, had like dug communism for some reason, I think he's always aware too he's really vulnerable. And there's two reasons why. One is the lie about his dad. That like original thing that like on his paperwork he lied about who his dad was, and he thinks a lot about the guy because it's a small town.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he thinks about the guy that he tested with first when he said my dad worked for the company. And so somewhere there's either someone who knows that or there's some document possibly that said his dad worked for a company and that could be verified.
Yeah.
He then finds out, like, because the Korean War lasts 3 years, which our wars, you know, you're like, that's hard. Let's spec so many time. But as things go on, it becomes clear that Stalin and Mao are losing interest, right?
Yeah.
And then Stalin dies. And the new government in Russia is sort of comparatively sweet. And they're like, this Stalin stuff is not working, girl. And like, we've decided to kind of try to turn a page. That they changed their mind fairly quickly is like a separate story. But
this would be the part in the Two Princes song where he goes, that's
when he starts scatting. Yeah. Exactly right. But he also finds out because in one of his leaves, he goes to his uncle and he finds out from his uncle that his mom has defected.
Oh, yeah.
Which is like kind of good and bad news. On the one hand, he has all the more reason to defect, which he's kind of been thinking about doing the whole time.
Right.
And also one more reason to go because, Jesus Christ, they're going to fucking find out about my mom.
Yeah.
I find out about my dad, and like I have published some newspapers and stuff like that are really pro-communist, but I just don't know if that's going to be enough.
No, because he's got his big communist uncle who's still there.
Yeah,
to be like, hey, your mom. He's like, hey, maybe stop bringing that up, buddy.
Right, and it would probably eventually his uncle himself might find some benefit in being like, my nephew is a secretly aligned, whatever. So all of this culminates, Andy, in 1953. Okay, Stalin's dead. July, we signed the armistice, which is obviously very different than the war ending. The war technically is still not over. We are still at war in Korea, but the armistice was signed. Kim becomes even more brutal as a leader because Stalin was kind of, and after Stalin died, the Russians that took over after Stalin were kind of restraining him a little bit. They were the ones, they're feeding him and they're the hand and all that stuff. But now that the war is over, he's really trying to condense an independent isolation. He doesn't need Russia anymore. He doesn't need China anymore. He's his own guy. And the Russians, he started to edit literally Photoshop before Photoshop, taking Russians out of portraits So like he's standing up, giving a huge speech. He just erased them, changed the reviews. Some of his early speeches weren't reviewed well. He would just change it. The people loved him. They cried. You know, he's getting a little crazier. And he's also not abiding by the armistice rules. No is like, we're not supposed to have these planes anymore. And so Kim would order, dismantle the MiGs, and then he'd have them shipped in crates to somewhere else and reassembled. And he is quietly building new air bases. And he builds one brand new air base after the armistice right next to the South Korean border. Oh boy. No is brought there. And they're like, okay, guys, so Kim has commanded constant warfare readiness. Here's our brand new airway right next to South Korea. We're now under all these new protections, so no one's going to be shooting us down because we're technically not shooting anybody down now. We're not attacking anyone. So just to get ready, what we're going to do tomorrow is we're going to start these practice runs. So just keep everybody loose in our MiGs. These brand new MiGs, by the way, MiG-15s, they're way hotter. And so tomorrow morning, we're going to start those. No wingman. You're going to take off by yourself, do a huge loop and land. And that's just going to be how we keep it loose, keep this airfield open. Yeah. See you tomorrow morning. And No is like, this is my shot. Yeah. And he knows tomorrow has to be the day. It will never come at me like that. He had a plan for what to do if he had to evade a wingman, to get away. If he was up in the air and decided to defect and he had a wingman, he's like, I'll literally spin around, go upside down, shake him off, wag my wings, shoot some colorful flare. I mean, he had a whole...
Oh, yeah.
He had a whole plan. But he was like, oh, man, I don't even have a wingman. Great. And he goes out for his last night, just hanging out around North Korea. Does he talk about this in the MiG-15? Yeah. What do you remember about that, like, last night before he defects?
I remember he's like super nervous because he's like, can they read my thoughts or something like that? Like he's like, oh my God. Like, and he's like trying to like be chill at the same time. He's like, okay. And then like, I think he like, one of his friends, it feels like he's on to him a little bit. Like, he's like, what are you doing tomorrow? He's like, I'm doing the training thing tomorrow. And he was like, okay, all right, and it's like, all right. But like, that's all I really remember of it from that one. Yeah.
I mean, it would have to be so trippy, right? To have decided that tomorrow's the day. Yeah. And you would have to be like, there's a sign over my head. And communism kind of tells you that there is, right? Yeah. Communism kind of tells you that there are these secret things and you should be looking for them. And he has to be like I told my daughter that her eyes turn pink when she lies. So that whenever she lies to me, she squints and she tries to cover her eyes. And I'm like, God damn, I don't know how long this is going to last. But. So he goes to bed that night and he's surprised by how well he sleeps. Okay. And he wakes up and the scheduled takeoff is 9:05. And girl gets, he gets out to the airfield. I get weird when I get nervous. I can't even imagine. You know what I mean? Yeah. Trying to keep your cool. And he's talking with one of the other pilots as they're sort of getting ready to take off. And because No is the best, his skills are agreed to be the greatest, he's going to go first. Yeah. And the guy who's going to take off after him is like, God, it's a beautiful day. I kind of feel like I want to fly a little more, than just the loop. And No's like, yeah, me too, kind of. You know what? Hey, why don't you go first? What an honor it will be for you because you will inaugurate this airfield. What an honor it will be for you. And what he's hoping is this guy who wants to fly a little bit more will take his time doing things. And when he comes in for his landing, that's when they will expect No to come back. So he's thinking, this guy will give me more time. And the guy's like, oh my God, thank you. And he's like, no, thank you. Okay, so it's time to take off. First guy takes off. And starts. No's turn to take off. And he's like, this airfield sucks. It's like really bumpy. Like, this is not a great surprise. And he takes off and he starts to do the loop. Okay. And what I love Andy is he gets to the point where, okay, I'm either going left and finishing this loop and going back to where I'm supposed to go, or I'm going to go fucking right. Yeah. And I'm going to defect. And I just I get chills right now just thinking about that moment because there's a difference between deciding to do something and doing something. Right. There's still a space in there. Deciding something's hard enough. But then there's still that second where you have to fucking
Yeah.
Do it.
I mean, there's those moments like in your life, where you're like, yeah, I'm going to do this thing. And then somebody's like, here's your opportunity. You're like, okay. Is there another one coming up, or can I hold on? Because I don't know if I'm completely ready. They're like, you do this or you don't do this. And you're like, okay. Well, and for this guy, I mean, it's like the stakes are so much higher, so it's like, okay, yeah. Because he even talks about like, he's like, maybe there'll be another chance. He's like, but maybe there won't be.
Maybe there won't be. And he is thinking too, like, I'm the best pilot they've got. I mean, as far as life goes in North Korea, like I'm pretty comfy. I eat well. I sleep in a pretty nice place. I'm given respect. But in the back of his mind, he's still like, they're going to find my ass out. And it's no fun. Can we just like having enough to eat and a safe place to sleep is literally the bare minimum. It's survival stuff.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take long for anybody, any creature really, to be like, but I could have a nice lamp, maybe a game. No.
Yeah.
So our buddy No hangs a right girl, and he's like, I'm doing it. And he goes for South Korea. And he's starting to think, okay, and he's waiting for a number of things. He's waiting for MiGs from his side to come up behind him and shoot his ass down. He is waiting for Sabres from the South Korean side to come up and shoot his ass down. He has a plan on how to evade. He has a plan, like I said, the colored flares and wobbling his wings. It always makes me laugh every time I think of it, because it's kind of my self-defense mechanism is I just shoot out colorful flares.
You just wobble your hands.
I'm really not a threat.
Yeah.
I'm not a threat. And he goes, okay, so he sees the airfield. It's called Kimpo Air Base. And there it is. And the runway. And nobody's shooting at him. And nobody's coming at him. Okay. But as he's looking at it, for him to land from the direction he's coming in, he would be landing against other planes that are landing from the opposite direction.
Yeah.
And the alternative to that is he does a circle around Kimpo so that he can land from the same direction the rest of the planes are, which means he's fucking circling an airbase. They're definitely going to see him. Yeah. He has much more, he's kind of like, I just got to get the fucking thing on the ground, right?
Right.
So he rolls the dice in his mind and is like, I'm just going to fucking land this way and hope I don't hit anybody.
At which point the theme song from Benny Hill starts playing. Yakety sax just starts playing. Dun, 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 dun.
Exactly. And I'd like to think of maybe a more ominous, kind of stirring, emotional, maybe a close-up on his eyes, a bead of sweat. But Andy's like, no, this is...
Because he's so worried about like hitting the other planes as they're also landing. And I think he almost hits like 2 on the way down. Right?
Yeah, the first one, he comes out, he's like, oh, fuck, I'm going to hit that guy for sure. But then, because the Sabe is so awesome, that thing actually lands and gets out of the way before. Yeah. But Buddy's wingman is landing right behind him. They do nearly collide on the ground. No, it takes a quick turn. They don't collide. And then among my favorite moments in this whole story is he's on the ground in a MiG. No one has shot him, and he just taxis to a parking spot.
Yep.
Just like drives and parks it. Every cockpit, do you remember, what does every MiG cockpit have stuck to the front of it? Do you remember?
Oh, the picture of Kim Il-jung.
The picture of Kim Il-sung, like Taylor Swift, fucking taped. Everybody's got to have a picture of this cunt in their cockpit. He rips that picture off. And he tears it to pieces. He jumps out of the plane with his hands up, and he says the only American word that he can remember from his childhood. Do you remember what word he said?
No, I don't. It was like hello or something like...
Motor car. He gets out, he's motor car. Which again, I'm reading this, I'm dying because I'm like, I am similar. Which is just word I know. And okay, crazy. Here is what's going on the American side of this. Okay. They had no fucking clue he was there.
One of the guys said that he was going to shoot him. He was like, I was about to shoot until you like popped out of the cockpit, like tearing that thing up. I didn't know what was going on.
Absolutely. And your Benny Hill theme is largely being played behind these guys.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Because it turns out that their radar was literally down for maintenance for probably a matter of minutes.
Yeah.
And it just so happened that nobody saw him on the radar. Then the first guy that he almost hits didn't see him. The second guy he almost hits is like, there's some asshole. This is the quote. There's some asshole landing the wrong way. Then he says, it's a goddamn MiG. This guy's name is Dave Williams. He was flying that second plane. On the ground, there's a guy named Jim Sutton who says if he'd circled, like to circle to come in so that he was landing in the same direction that the rest of the planes, he's like, we 100% would have shot him down.
Right.
So good job.
Good job, bruh.
And then there was a third guy whose story I heard. He's reading a book called Astounding Stories, which is a piece of science fiction literature that factors heavily into a bunch of different stories that are actually coming up. Things. But the fact that this guy's reading Astounding Stories, he's got his feet up and he sees, kind of in the same instant, sees that it's a MiG. And he says he closes his eyes and just braces for the bullets. Yeah. Because he thinks this guy is just about to open fire on the whole base. And then slowly just opens his eyes and is like, and then he said he got out and tore up a picture of his girlfriend. He thought, he didn't see who was on this picture. I don't think that he thought Kim Il-sung was a woman, but he thought this guy's mad with love and he's tearing up some picture of a woman, which I'm like, God, that says a lot more about you than him.
But I also like to think this guy did call up his girlfriend or wife or at least a family member of some sort. Like, I just lived my own astounding story just now.
Yes, baby, do I have an astounding story for you?
What do you mean, what's that sound? It's the Benny Hill theme song. You don't know that? Okay, anyway. Yeah, it's still going. It's going to go for a while, actually.
That's right. It's on a loop around here. Eventually, it becomes very clear, if you wanted to hurt us, there would have been so many clues by now. So they are starting to get like, okay, motor car to you too. Good sir. They shake hands. There's a picture of them shaking hands. Oh yeah. And then he is taken to HQ for a debrief. In the meantime, the Sabres fucking scramble because they are like, is he being followed by a bunch of people who are trying to kill him? Or are we about to get bombed so they can destroy this MiG that he just gave us? So they fixed up the radar and these guys got back in the plane. And the only thing they do with this plane, right, is because no one wants World War III. Really. At least these guys don't. I'm sure some cunt somewhere does.
There's definitely somebody who's like,
but these guys are like, oh shit. So for the most part, the positioning is like, don't provoke World War III. Okay. We have a MiG-15. They probably know we have it. So what the whole thing is like, they took it apart. They literally wheeled in the thing, take it apart. The Benny Hill thing is probably still playing. Take it apart, but learn as much as we can, put it back together, and then put it out there to be like, you come get it. Yeah. Don't get mad at us. Somebody brought this to us. We didn't steal it. Don't nuke us. Don't provoke war. And they were just sort of waiting. They even brought it to a neutral country at one point. And we're like, do you want this back? Right. We swear. And North Korea was like, well, what? We have no idea. Everything here looks good.
We didn't lose a plane.
That whole thing took 17 minutes.
Yeah.
From nose takeoff to walking into HQ.
Wow.
17 minutes. Amazing. So nose probably feeling a lot of feelings. He's sitting in a room. They eventually get somebody who can fucking speak Korean and English sufficient and is not just some guy, because obviously what we're about to hear is pretty important. So we're going to make sure we get somebody who
It kind of reminds me real quick of a Emo Phillips joke where he's like, my wife's parents visited. They're from Cuba, which they only speak Cuban, which is like Spanish, but with fewer words for luxury items. So I have to, which I have to imagine, like North Korea and South Korea probably have similar.
I would imagine, yeah, especially now, right? Yeah. But he sits down, right, and everyone's like, "Wow, wow." Yeah. Do we have questions for you? Yeah. And he, of course, tells them a ton of shit that they need to know. One of the things he learns that day, though, is that there was a $100,000 reward for that plane. Yeah. Oh, can you tell us what you remember about Operation Moolah?
So that was a weird thing for them because he was like, "Oh, I'm getting money." He's like, "I didn't do it for the money. I want that to be made perfectly clear. I did not know about this money." But also, there was a weird thing with the press. The press like really went after him. They're like, "You did this for the money," because they were like, "We dropped all these leaflets everywhere explaining this." He's like, "We weren't there. We were in China. We never got any of these pamphlets. They never came to us." And then at one point, the Air Force asked him to be like, "Hey, we're gonna do this press conference. Just say like, hey, they're not gonna pay me the money." we're going to pay you the money, but just say they're not going to pay me the money. And he's like, okay. And then he's getting ready to do it. And then 3 days later, they're like, don't worry about it. We're not going to do that anymore. He's like, I don't understand what's happening right now, but okay, sounds good. And they, for a while in the press, he was known as the Moolah Man.
Yeah.
Which I was like, that's not a good nickname.
That's not great.
He's like, I don't even have money. I just got here. Chill out here.
Yeah, it's he even says, these leaflets, I mean, because technically the U.S. military dropped leaflets to warn civilians about incoming air raids too. And like, I don't know if you've ever like tried to throw something out a car window. Like the leaflets did not go where they were supposed to go. Having these things, even if you were lucky enough to be like, oh, let's see what's this. We're going to get bombed at 3:00 today, babe. We got to go. Like those things were going to be criminalized. You can't have this shit.
Right.
Then they said they put it out on radio. They were like, well, we played the offer all over radio. And he was like, what the fuck do you think happens in North Korea, man? That we're just reading leaflets and listening to the radio?
One radio station. That's it. And we're not allowed to listen to that one even.
He's also like, we don't know what $100,000 is either. So if you would have, he said, if it would have gotten to me and if this was going to be like a really alluring bribe, they should have said, I have a home and a job in the U.S. Because just getting $100,000 actually I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
But he is also like, I did not know about it. I believe he had no idea about it.
No.
But I will take it.
Yeah.
And he does, to your point, get a little like, because if nothing else, No is skilled at like smelling bullshit and finding a way to make it good work out for him, right?
Right.
So he was like, no, I don't know anything about that. I didn't do it for the money. I understand how this is also a question of nobility, that people are kind of assigning a like, is this guy a good guy or a bad guy? Which was why they wanted him to tell the press, I didn't know about it and I'm not going to get it.
Yeah.
And when they eventually do, and there's also stuff with Eisenhower. Eisenhower didn't want to give it to him.
Right.
And because he was like, I think we're bribing turncoats. I don't like defectors because they're like, right? Like I value their shit, but they're bad guys.
Yeah.
And so he doesn't want to reward this. And then it's also the like nanny aspect of like, he wouldn't know what to do with $100,000.
Right. Well, they put him like on he could only use his money for like so much money every month or something like that.
Yeah,
like,
they put it in a trust.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I will say this, and I'm only repeating what No himself said and his biographer said was that he got a little mad and a little suspect that they weren't going to pay him and they were keeping the money. But in hindsight, he did get his money and it was probably best to keep it in a trust, not only because he didn't know exactly what to do with it, but a lot of people tried to get the money from him. So people are like, he doesn't speak English very well. He probably doesn't know how things work. Yeah. And he has $100,000. So I'm going to have him invest in me.
And this is $100,000 1950s money, not $100,000 now.
Yeah, it's like $1 million, dude. It's a lot. Yeah, for sure. And to your point, the media, it's sort of like there's two sides. One side of the media questioned him about the money a lot just because they're really curious what you're going to do with the money and did you get it? Yeah. And then the other side was sort of like, did the government screw you? So there'd be some that would be like, the government fucked this guy and they didn't actually give him his money. And so then it became the government's job to kind of be like, see, here's his giant check. Yeah. We totally did.
McMahon comes tottering out there. He's like, hey. And you're like, oh, okay.
Moolah man. Yeah. His dream is to live in America, and he does. He changes his name to the Americanized Kenneth Rowe. Yeah. He goes to college in Delaware. He studies...
what a weird pick. They're like, you can go anywhere. He's like, University of Delaware it is. They're like, okay,
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, they kind of offered him that one too. That was sort of a curious thing. But he's like, sure, Delaware, fuck, what do I care? Yeah. Studies aeronautics. He works for Boeing, Lockheed, General Motors. He works for a ton of companies over the years. He meets Nixon.
Yep.
Years later, of course, he gets married. He has 2 sons and a daughter. One of his sons is developmentally delayed but works in like this care facility and has a good job and is pretty independent.
Yep.
His other son studies astrophysics, becomes an astrophysicist, has a nice house, gets married, and then 4 months after his wedding, he kills his wife and himself.
What?
On September 21st.
No, what? Whoa. That's insane.
And he even says his son killed himself and his wife on September 21st and knows like, I don't think it has anything to do with my defection.
Yeah.
I think it was a coincidence. And everyone's like, do you?
Do you?
That seems, I mean, maybe.
It's possible, but still that's odd. It's very odd.
But he's very quiet. He's unassuming. He's well-liked. He writes his book.
Yep.
Blaine Harden writes a book about him. He himself dies as an old man in 2022. He is reunited with his mother.
Yep.
He finds his mom again, which is great. As for the, where are they now? He does find out a buddy of his best friend in North Korea, is executed as a reaction to his defection, as are a few other folks.
It's like 5 dudes all in total. And he was like, I don't even know. He's like you said, his best friend. And then he was like, after that, he's kind of guessing. He's like, I think this guy, but I'm not sure about these other 3.
The one that hurt him, though, was his best friend. And and the guy that they executed that was his best friend had also anti-communist kind of secret. They didn't really confide in each other, but they seemed to have sort of a kindred understanding that, like, we're just fucking faking it here, man.
Yeah. There was like, it's a country where like this stuff you can't just be like open about. He said there's one point he accidentally whistled a song he'd heard on the American radio station, like just without thinking about it. And he immediately shut down because the guy was like, hey, from the American station, right? He was like, yeah, no, I don't know.
I was just listening for threats to the great leader. Yeah. Crazy. What I'm going to do next is Andy and I are actually going to talk a little bit more about some of the fucking interesting peripheral characters of the story, including a guy named Andy Brown.
Oh, yeah.
Who is a secret agent who is like No's handler when he first gets there. And this guy is his story is fucking nuts. And I mentioned the nuggets of defectors, American defectors that went to North Korea. But that, my friends, is what we call bonus material. So if you want to continue with me and Andy and hear about all of this extra stuff, well, you can. If you're a Patreon subscriber, it's already there. You can probably already find us. We might even get naked. Oh my God. Thank you so much, Andy Ryder. I want everybody to immediately look at you and your beautiful sideburns, to download your comedy album, and to go right now and subscribe to your podcast.
Yeah.
I will be joining them. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Don.
Thanks again to Andy Ryder. Oh, man. And if you want more, girl, come on, join us over in the bonus content. Hey, Patreon, hey. Where we discuss, whether or not No Kum Suk is a hero, and the crazy story of a guy who was a translator for No. His name was Andy Brown, and he might also have been a double agent. Crazy. And also the story of a couple of American GIs who defected to North Korea. To North Korea. Yeah, it's crazy. As for us, the next new episode is right around the corner and might melt your face off. I mean it. I go deep on Jack Parsons, the early rocket scientist and sex occultist, with, as my guest, a bona fide rocket scientist. Yeah, she currently works at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, guys. It's going to be amazing. Until then, our theme song was composed and performed by Kat Perkins. A reminder that you can find my sources, links to the books, documentaries, and articles I reference in the summary of this episode, or by emailing us, hilfpodcast@gmail.com, or messaging us on social media at hilfpodcast. If you'd like to leave a little cash on the nightstand, I'm so grateful for that. You can find me on Patreon or buy me a coffee. Links to these and more are all in the show notes. This has been HILF, History I'd Like to Fuck with Dawn Brody. I'm Dawn Brody, reminding you that history is a party and everybody's coming.